Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Mortal Kombat 11. Now I have never played through a Mortal Kombat game before. Typically I'm not a huge fan of fighting games like this or Street Fighter. I have played through Injustice before and I played through all of Pokken. Now obviously Pokken, if you've watched that casual review, I did not like it at all because there's no story attached to it and you're required to play the same Pokemon over and over again. So it got very repetitive, but we are here to talk about Mortal Kombat 11. So I have played matches of Mortal Kombat before. Most of the time it was like at the arcade or on a regular Sega Genesis or something like that, just a couple rounds with friends for fun, but I never played through any of the single player modes. And I just kind of want to preface this casual review with the fact that I only played the single player story mode of this game, and I know that they even came out with a second story mode called Aftermath, and I did not play that either. So there's a ton of other content bundled up with this game. There's like a tower that you have to climb by fighting people and different arcade modes like that. I didn't dive into any of that, just strictly the story mode itself. Now, if you're like me and you're diving into Mortal Kombat 11 with no previous fighting experience, there is a tutorial. It'll straight up ask you like, hey, do you want to learn how to play this game? And it'll go over all of the basics for you. Granted, it's a lot of information, so most of that stuff I tended to forget about when I was in the heat of the battle, but it just gives you a good groundwork to go off of. It's probably better to just watch like a YouTube video, tutorial, something to really dive in and learn how the systems work. But I want to say you don't really have to be good at this game to play through the story mode. I played through it on normal difficulty, and while I did try to pull off a couple of the combos, we'll kind of get into that a little bit in a second, but I feel like you could play through all of this story mode in normal difficulty by just button mashing. Now, that might make some of the pros cringe when I say that, and especially if they are watching my gameplay, they might be really cringing because I don't really know what I'm doing here, but yeah, you know what? Just if you're just like me, you could go in and just button mash your way through and play through the end of the credits if you try enough times. So I'm mostly in this for the story of the game, and the plot, it's kind of acts as fan service. I bet veterans of the Mortal Kombat series will appreciate the story more than I did. Basically, like, they bring in the original cast from like the first Mortal Kombat games into the new world of Mortal Kombat 11, and I am so far behind in the plot now. I am 10 Mortal Kombats behind, and I can tell that I am missing out on a lot of character interaction and fan service here. A lot of the times right before like two characters will duke it out, they'll say like, hey, I defeated you once, I'll defeat you again, or oh man, remember when that happened? And I'm just like, yeah, this is the first time I'm being introduced to any of these characters, so this is all just dandy for me. But I was able to follow the story enough. It seems like its own kind of standalone story, even though they talk about past interactions a lot. So there's a lot of time manipulation here, and the main baddie of this game is a woman by the name of Kronika. She just seems to be able to manipulate time in some way, and she wants the timeline to go her way rather than the way the timeline has been going these last 10 games. There's these different realms and a ton of different characters, and all of these different realms are like their own parallel weird universes. Like there's a deserty realm, there's a nether realm full of all these demons, there's obviously Earth realm, which is how we know it to be, and then these characters that populate these different realms. Like obviously you have your typical army guys that use technology to fight, and then you have your gods like Raiden, and then you have your demon people, and obviously there's, I recognize a couple characters just from osmosis watching other videos of Mortal Kombat, but I know some of the more basic characters like Scorpion and Sub-Zero, but there's some characters like Johnny Cage, Cassandra Cage, like these army guys. I don't really know a lot about these characters, but I kind of picked up on what they're all about by watching the cutscenes. Now, there are a ton of cinematics here, and this, depending on who you are, it might drive you a little crazy, but playing through the story mode, about 3/4 of your time will be spent watching cinematics, and then just think of it like a movie, and then little breaks in between where you get to do the fight scenes, and then it'll go back to a cutscene. I know a couple of people don't really like just watching these cutscenes. They'd rather play through the game and have their story intermingled into the gameplay. But for me, this this works pretty well. I did like this a lot in Injustice as well. I just need like that story. I need that narrative for my game, and that's why I think I enjoyed Injustice a lot more than Pokken. And I liked it here, you know, just treat it like a movie, you know, pull up some popcorn, maybe not some popcorn because that leaves grease residue on your fingers, but grab a drink, watch your cutscene, and then when you can tell a fight scene is coming on, get ready to duke it out. Now, I did play on the Nintendo Switch, so it does kind of do this interesting thing where it seamlessly puts you into a fight scene right after a cutscene. There's not like really any loading time here, unless you get a game over, obviously, then you have to sit through a loading screen, but it's like the game is loading while you're watching the cinematic, and the cinematics themselves actually look really decent even on the Nintendo Switch. But right when that fight scene comes, you can tell a fight scene is coming because the graphics take a huge hit, and juxtaposed to the cinematics, the visuals during the fight scenes on the Nintendo Switch leave something to be desired for sure. You can definitely tell the lines on the characters are very, very jaggy, but as far as the frame rate runs, it actually runs all right. I never noticed any stutters or anything like that, which is pretty impressive on the Switch. I thought the performance and all of the actors, the voice actors in this game were really, really good, with one exception, and that being Sonya Blade. I was watching this cinematic, and anytime Sonya Blade would talk, she just sounded so flat and emotionless, and I was like, geez, everyone else is doing such a good job. So I looked it up, and it turns out the voice actor for Sonya Blade was Ronda Rousey. And if you're not familiar with her, she's like this really professional UFC, WWE fighter, and she's really good. She's, from what I can tell, I typically don't watch these fights, but she's really good. She's a really great fighter, and obviously she could kick my butt. But as far as her voice acting, I'm not saying I could do any better, but compared to all of the other actors in this game, you can definitely tell that she is not a professional. So let's dive into the gameplay. Obviously, most people know what Mortal Kombat is all about. It is a very, very bloody, violent, 1 versus 1 fighter. The original game was actually part of the reason that video games have ratings now. Like, if you go back to it today, all the pixely blood and everything, you can kind of scoff at because it's like nothing. But back in the day, it went to court, and it was used as an example of, are video games too violent, and are they making people violent? I'm not here to tell you one way or the other. I'm just here to tell you that these games are very bloody. I don't mind it, but you know, maybe while my mom's watching this, she might be a little shocked. The amount of punishment these guys can take is astounding, and there might be some lore reason why these guys can get their ribs ruptured and their bones cracked and lose gallons and gallons of blood and still be in fighting condition in the very next cutscene. I don't really know how they're able to take this punishment. Maybe we just shrug and say it's because it's a video game, so taking a beating doesn't really matter. But yeah, it's a fighting game, best 2 out of 3. There's 2 different punches, 2 different kicks, and obviously you're going to want to combo these punches and kicks so you can get a nice string of punishment on an enemy before they hit the ground and they are able to get back on their feet. You can guard against this stuff, and then you can punish these guards with different grabs. There's a lot of technique to here. Obviously, there's been 11 games of gameplay for people to really hone their skills and get really good at these fighting games. Obviously, I'm not one of those people. I play this game very casually. Most of the time during this story mode, they will have you play as a certain character, and they will have you play a couple different rounds against a couple different enemies as the same character. So you have some time to kind of practice up some of their special moves. For fighting games like this, there is an input of commands that you do with these combos in order to do like a super special move, and oftentimes I would be pausing the game to look up how to pull off some of these cooler moves and very unsuccessfully doing them, but it was always satisfying when I finally did pull off a cool move where I bust out something special. Most of the time I would end up resorting to button mashing, though. I'm a little embarrassed to admit, but you know, if you're casual like me, just do that. I've seen some of these veterans play games though on YouTube, and they are so good at chaining these combos together, just bouncing people up in the air so they can never recover and taking up their whole life force just with one single chain of combos. It's really impressive. You know, some of these people who really dedicate their lives to these fighting games are very, very talented. You kind of have to pull off these things down to the like single frame rate. You have to really get your timing correct, and that's not something that I'm willing to put in the time to do. Now, if you get low enough health, they do kind of give you the saving grace where you can pull off a really cinematic special ability, and these are where it gets really gruesome aside from the fatalities. And I don't know, I think it's always so cool whenever you play a new character just to see like how how they utilize their weapons to really destroy their enemies. And the same goes here for Fatalities. For those of you who are not familiar, Fatalities are basically like, if your enemy's almost dead, you can pull off a Fatality, which is an equally cool cinematic, special, visceral ability. Sometimes even just in the middle of gameplay, it'll go into slow motion and it'll zoom up to the enemy's bones being destroyed in slow motion, and you can see their organs just getting damaged, and it can get pretty gruesome. I think I've gotten that point across. You can even use the environment around you. So like if there's a battle axe in the background and you're over it, you can use this battle axe to slash your enemies a couple times. Or sometimes there'll be like a chain with an anvil above an enemy and you can pull in that chain to drop the anvil. It's always fun to utilize the environment that way. Now, I kind of wonder if this normal difficulty might be a bit too easy for people who are very familiar with how to play Mortal Kombat, because most of the time I was able to best my opponent, best 2 out of 3. Sometimes every now and again I would have trouble on a certain character, but aside from the very final boss, I just thought this game was pretty easy, which I appreciate. I kind of wonder if the game can tell when I am losing really badly and my AI opponent holds back in a way and lets me get a couple cheap shots on them. I appreciate that, because maybe if someone's really good at this game, the AI intuitively ramps up. I suspect that's the case. Or if I end up dying over and over again, I could especially tell this with the final boss, or maybe I just got lucky that one time, but I feel like the game gets easier and easier every time you get a game over. It just feels intuitive that way, but maybe the AI is just hit or miss and I get lucky. This game has you playing a lot of different characters, but my favorite this time around was probably Liu Kang. I like his ability where you can kick the guy over and over again as you're dashing towards them. I found that ability really satisfying. Now, whenever I do play some of these older Mortal Kombat games, my go-to has always been Scorpion, just because I know how to pull off his 2 signature moves. The signature, get over here! I know how to do that move in the back of my head. And then that move where you pop out of the back of the screen and pop through the other side of the screen. So whenever I'm at the arcade with some friends and they want to play Mortal Kombat, Scorpion has usually been my go-to character just because of those 2 moves. But yeah, this game I found Liu Kang to be the most enjoyable. I did enjoy playing most of the characters though. They all seem to have their own signature moves and abilities, and it was fun. I like the story mode because it has me playing this variety of characters. Overall, like I said, I just played the story mode, but I treated it kind of like a movie with the gameplay breaks in between. I had a fun time playing through it. You know, it only took 2 days. I think it took me a max of maybe 5 hours to play through, which is just fine with me. If you played full price for this game, maybe you want to get some more bang for your buck by playing some of these other side modes and missions. And I didn't play through the extension of this game, Aftermath, but just the single player story mode, had a fun time, and I definitely would go back to it again eventually. I think I will give this game a 3 out of 5. From an outsider who doesn't typically play these games, that's actually a pretty high review. I didn't think I would enjoy this game as much as I did. Well guys, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Mortal Kombat 11, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!